In the heart of a land kissed by sun and sculpted by winds, where baobab trees whispered secrets to the stars and drums echoed through the red earth valleys, lived a young woman named Amina. She was beauty personified, not just in face, but in spirit. Her laughter was music that made even the oldest elders smile, and her kindness reached beyond her own village to strangers and beasts alike. Amina was known far and wide, not because she sought attention, but because goodness, like sunlight, cannot be hidden. She had grown up among the people of Nwanje village, nestled between lush green forests and sapphire rivers. Her life had always been simple, but filled with morning dances, evening stories by the fire, and the ever-watchful eyes of her two best friends, Kemi and Zula. They had played together as children, fetched water as teenagers, and now, as young women, they still laughed like sisters, or so Amina believed. The village buzzed with excitement. Prince Oba, son of the great King Duro, had chosen Amina as his bride. It wasn't just love, it was destiny. The oracle herself had whispered that their union would bring blessings not only to the royal family, but to the entire land. Preparations stretched for weeks. Baskets of woven gold, gowns dyed with crushed hibiscus and indigo, and drums carved from sacred wood. Everything was being prepared for a wedding that would be sung about for generations. But behind the smiles and congratulations, something darker brewed. Eyes watched with envy, hearts beat with bitterness. And while Amina was busy preparing for the happiest day of her life, the two people she trusted most were plotting her fall. This is the story of how joy turned to sorrow, how love was tested by betrayal, and how one woman's fate took a turn no one, not even the gods, could have predicted. Now, let us begin with part 1. The Radiant Bride. The golden sun rose gently over Nwanje village, painting the thatched rooftops in shades of fire and honey. Birds chirped from the treetops, echoing a chorus of celebration. This was not just any day. This was the eve of Amina's wedding. A day many believed had been written in the stars before she was even born. Amina stood by the riverbank. Her feet dipped in the cool stream as she watched her reflection shimmer. Her long black hair was braided with tiny gold beads, each one representing a virtue: patience, humility, courage, and love. Her skin glowed with the softness of tamarind, and her eyes were deep and thoughtful, holding both laughter and wisdom behind. Her, Kemi and Zula approached, carrying baskets of flowers and laughter. Kemi, taller and more poised, wore a grin that never quite reached her eyes. Zula, shorter with sharp features, had a voice like velvet, but a heart that had long turned to stone. "Amina," Kemi called out sweetly, "you look like a goddess. Prince Oba will faint when he sees you tomorrow." Amina smiled and turned, her heart full. "Don't tease me, Kemi. My heart is already beating too fast." "Do you ever think," Zula added, "how strange it is that out of all the maidens in the kingdom, the prince chose you?" Amina blinked, confused. "Why strange?" "Oh, I mean, not strange in a bad way," Zula said quickly. "Just lucky." Amina laughed it off, unaware of the storm swirling in Zula's chest. Because Zula, once the most admired in their group, had slowly watched Amina's star rise above hers. And Kemi, whose family once ruled a neighboring land before it fell to drought and war, had never adjusted to being second. As they walked back to the village, the roads were alive with music. Drummers practiced beats that would lead Amina down the aisle, and girls rehearsed dances in circles, their hips swaying like waves in the wind. Vendors shouted praises and offered gifts: jars of honey, bundles of yam, bracelets made from cowrie shells. Old Mama Jola, the village's storyteller, watched Amina pass with soft eyes. "Ah, child," she whispered, "your light shines bright. May it not burn too hot." That night, the village feasted in celebration. Fires burned high, and the scent of grilled meat and plantains filled the air. Amina danced with joy in her steps, her hands interlocked with the prince's as their bodies moved in perfect harmony. Every eye watched them, some with love, others with envy. Later, under the moonlight, as the village quieted and the stars blinked above, Kemi and Zula sat alone beneath the large Iroko tree. They said nothing at first, only stared at the glowing embers of the fire. "She has everything." Now Kemi finally muttered, "Even the prince." "And what do we have?" Zula replied coldly. "Nothing but smiles and thanks, as if we are her servants." Kemi leaned closer. "There is a way." Zula looked up sharply. "A way. A way to make it stop." "Just for a while. Just long enough that she won't marry him." Zula hesitated. "You mean a curse?" "Not a curse. A lesson." And with that, the seed of betrayal was planted. But while they plotted in silence, Amina slept peacefully in her hut, dreaming of a life full of love, of children with Abba's smile, of songs sung in her name. She did not know that her trust was about to be shattered, not by enemies, but by those who had once braided her hair and wiped her tears. The winds that night whispered warnings, but no one was listening. The morning sun rose heavy and slow, as if the sky itself was reluctant to face the day ahead. Birds still sang, and children still ran through the village paths, chasing laughter. But the air was thicker than usual, as if something unseen lingered just beyond the trees. Amina awoke with a heart full of joy. Today, she would become a queen. She stepped out of her hut, the final touches of her bridal robe shimmering in the light. Threads of gold embroidered into deep red fabric hugged her form like a second skin. Her skin had been bathed in palm oil and lavender, her fingers adorned with coral rings. Aunties and cousins buzzed around her like bees, tending a sacred flower, adjusting her veil, blessing her with prayers, tying sacred beads around her ankles. But even as she smiled and twirled, Amina couldn't shake the faintest feeling, like a shadow brushing against her soul. "Kemi?" she called. "Zula." They had promised to return early to help her with the final rites before the ceremony. But hours passed, and there was no sign of them. Strange, Amina thought. They had never missed a moment in her life before. What Amina didn't know was that, while she prepared to become a bride, Kemi and Zula were already deep in the forest. The trees stood tall and ancient, their branches tangled like the fingers of the dead. A place feared by children, whispered about by the elders, and only visited by those willing to trade pieces of their soul for power. They called it Igbo Ojuju, the forest of spirits. Zula held a basket tightly, filled with offerings, crushed kola nuts, 7 black feathers, and a lock of Amina's hair stolen while she slept the night before. "Are you sure about this?" Zula whispered, her voice trembling. Kemi's eyes burned. "It's too late to go back." They approached a small hut hidden beneath a thick canopy of vines. It was crooked, leaning like an old drunk, and the smoke rising from its chimney smelled of iron and decay. They knocked once. Then again, the door creaked open on its own. Inside sat a woman, or something like one. Her skin was the color of charcoal, her hair white as bone. She had no eyes, only hollow sockets that glowed faintly blue. Around her neck were strings of teeth, human and animal alike. "You seek what is forbidden," the witch said without looking at them. "You want her light to dim so yours may shine." Kemi stepped forward. "We just want to stop her wedding, nothing more." "A lie tastes like sour wine," the witch hissed. "But I will give you what you ask. There is a price." Atia shivered. "What price?" The witch smiled, her teeth yellow and sharp. "You must speak the words and spill the oil upon the sacred stone. But know this, what is done cannot be undone by your hands." Kemi nodded and removed a small gourd filled with black oil. The witch handed them a jagged stone etched with ancient runes. Together, the two women chanted, "Wonogadera, Kadu Pipu Naimye." Let her voice fall, let her light go out. They poured the oil over the stone, and in that moment, the air turned cold. The forest grew silent. Somewhere in the distance, thunder cracked, though there were no clouds. The witch's sockets glowed brighter. "It is done," she whispered, back in the village. Amina was being led by the handmaids to the grove where the prince waited. Drums beat. Flutes danced in the air. The people lined the path, singing her name, Amina, Amina. But as she took her first step down the aisle of flowers, her vision blurred. The world began to spin. She clutched her head, then her chest, then she screamed. But it came out a croak. Her legs buckled. Her skin began to shrink. Bubble, change. Gasps turned to screams. Mothers shielded their children's eyes. In the middle of the aisle, where moments before stood a radiant bride, there now sat a small, green frog, its eyes wide with terror, its voice lost. Chaos broke loose. Abba rushed forward. "Where is she? What is this?" The priest backed away, whispering prayers. Elders argued. People wailed, but Kemi and Zula stood in the back, holding each other, pretending to be shocked. "She's gone," Kemi cried. "The gods have cursed her. She must have angered the spirits." Zula wailed. The frog leaped, frightened, in two. The nearby bushes and Amina, now lost in the body of a creature, disappeared into the forest. No one noticed the small locket she dropped in the grass. A gift from Oba. Inside, it still held a tiny painting of them, side by side. Smiling, the wedding was called off. Oba refused to speak to anyone. Days turned to weeks. He stopped eating. He stopped smiling. Something in him had broken, but deep. In the forest, Amina was not dead. She was very much alive, trapped, afraid, and alone. And this was only the beginning. The forest was dark and unfamiliar, its trees taller than towers, their trunks twisted like the limbs of sleeping giants. Every sound made Amina jump, the crack of branches, the cry of distant animals, the rustle of wind through the leaves. But none of it frightened her more than what had already happened. She was no longer herself. She had no arms to stretch, no voice to scream, no feet to run. Her hands were gone, replaced with slick green limbs. Her smooth brown skin was now cold and slimy. Her reflection in a pool of still water sent waves of terror through her. Amina was a frog. And worst of all, no one knew where she was. Time passed, though she could not tell how much. Days, weeks, maybe more. She learned to hop instead of walk. She drank from puddles and slept beneath leaves. The forest became her prison and her home. She saw the world now from the ground, everything towering above her. But even in her animal form, her heart remained human. Her memories, her mother's lullabies, the scent of hibiscus in her wedding gown. Appa's warm hands still pulsed through her like blood. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw their wedding day. And the betrayal. The betrayal. Kemi. She still couldn't understand it. The same girls she had laughed with, shared secrets with, braided hair with, they had destroyed her. Why? Why? Wasn't her love enough? One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, Amina sat by a stream, watching tiny fish dance in the water. She felt the weight of loneliness settle in her tiny chest. She had cried before, but this time her tears were different. They shimmered. They floated in the air. And just as the last one fell, a voice spoke. "Why does the frog weep?" Startled, Amina turned. Before her stood a tortoise, old with a cracked shell covered in moss and eyes that glowed with age and wisdom. He moved slowly, but with purpose. "Don't be afraid," he said, lowering his head. "I've seen you from afar. You are not like the others. Your eyes are too human." Amina tried to speak, but only croaks escaped her lips. The tortoise smiled sadly. "I know your story, little one. The forest hears many things. Trees speak in silence. And even betrayal echoes louder than thunder." She looked at him, confused and hopeful. He sat beside her. "They turned you, didn't they? Friends with cold hearts and jealous hands." She nodded. "The magic they used is not ordinary. It is old, dark, rooted in pain and deceit." Amina tilted her head. "How could it be undone?" "The curse," the tortoise continued, "can only be broken by true love's tears. Not just any love, but one that is willing to feel your pain, to weep for you with a pure heart." Oba, she saw his face in her mind again. "But there's more," the tortoise said. "The one who must cry for you cannot be told. He must feel it, see the truth, believe even when no one else does." Amina's heart sank. How would Oba ever find her in this vast forest? How would he know the frog was her? "You must wait," the tortoise said. "But not in silence. Leave signs. Speak with your soul. Let the wind carry your sadness. The right heart will hear it." And so Amina began to hope. With the help of the tortoise and other forest animals, birds, monkeys, even curious ants, she began to create small clues. Arrangements of leaves in the shape of hearts, stones placed in a circle, a trail of flower petals leading from the edge of the forest to the heart of the woods, and at night she sang, not in words but in melody, soft, sad, and haunting. The kind of tune that made the trees sway and the stars lean closer, far away. In the royal palace, Oba began to dream. He would wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, eyes wet. He would hear her laughter in the wind, smell her scent in the air, see her face in pools of water. At first, he thought it was grief, but then he heard the song. One evening, while riding through the village outskirts, he paused by the forest's edge and heard a faint melody. Faint, ... but familiar. A tune only Amina used to hum. The one she sang when they first met. The one she always whispered to herself when nervous. He dismounted. He listened, and he followed the sound. Into the woods, his guards called out, afraid, "Your Highness, that forest is cursed." But Oba walked on, deeper and deeper, past trees older than memory, past roots that looked like fingers, until he saw it, a frog sitting by a glowing pool, its eyes human, its gaze pleading, and then, as if it knew it had to try, the frog leaped onto a stone and began to hum the tune. Oba dropped to his knees. His hand shook as he reached for the small creature. "Amina," he whispered. The frog looked at him, and in its eyes he saw her. The love of his life, the woman who had been taken from him. Tears welled in his eyes. One slipped down his cheek. The moment it touched the frog's skin, light burst from its body. The air rippled. The trees shivered. The forest held its breath. The frog glowed gold and green, then began to change. Slowly, limbs lengthened. Skin softened. Eyes closed, then opened, and before Oba stood Amina, naked, trembling, and human once more. Oba wrapped her in his cloak and held her tight. Neither spoke, neither needed to. Love had found a way, but Amina's eyes burned with something else, not just gratitude, justice. The sun rose slowly over Nwanje village, golden rays touching rooftops and trees, breathing warmth back into a land that had gone cold since the day of Amina's disappearance. But this sunrise was different. It was not the usual start of another day. It was a sign something sacred had shifted, because Amina had returned at the edge of the forest, where wild vines met the open plains, a royal chariot awaited. Drawn not by horses, but by great antelope from the deep forest, cloaked in ceremonial vines and feathers. On the chariot stood Abba, tall and proud, and beside him, veiled in white silk. Her eyes blazing with truth, was Amina. Her beauty had changed. No longer soft like petals in the wind, it now held the fierce glow of someone who had seen darkness and survived. She was no longer the blushing bride. She was something more, something ancient and divine. The villagers gathered, quickly. First children, then mothers, then elders with weak knees and wide eyes. Drums that had long been silent began to beat again, as if the land itself had awoken. Word spread like fire. She has returned. The bride is back. Oba raised a hand, and the crowd silenced. He stepped down from the chariot, turned, and helped Amina to the ground. Her bare feet touched the earth as if greeting an old friend. She looked around faces she had known all her life, some filled with joy, others with shock, and two, frozen in fear. Kemi and Zula stood near the back of the crowd, dressed in faded colors, their smiles tight, their eyes darting. They had not expected this. They had told everyone that Amina had been taken by the spirits, punished for pride or disobedience. They had cried the loudest at her disappearance. They had tried to comfort Oba, even offered quiet suggestions that he move on, that the wedding was cursed. But now, ere Lai stood in the full light of morning, Amina stepped forward and spoke. Her voice, though soft, cut through the air like thunder. I was betrayed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I was taken not by spirits, not by fate, by hands I once held in friendship, hearts I once called sisters. The crowd turned, all eyes on Kemi and Zula. Oba held up a pouch inside it, the lock of Amina's hair they had used for the ritual. This was found in the forest, near the witch's hut, alongside sacred oil and a stone inscribed with curses. He tossed the pouch to the ground. You used dark magic, Amina said, her voice growing stronger. You turned me into a beast on the day I was to be married. You stole my life, and yet here I stand. Kemi stepped forward, trembling. It was a mistake. We didn't mean to harm you. We were afraid you'd forget us. Zula followed. Yes, it was only meant to delay, not destroy. Lies, the village elder, spat from his stool. Mama Jola, the old storyteller, stepped forward. Envy wears many masks, but the truth always finds its way. Then came the chief priest, dressed in red and white robes, holding a staff carved from sacred Iroko. He had heard enough. Let the gods judge. The crowd parted as he stepped forward. He motioned for a fire to be lit in the center of the square. As flames licked the sky, he pulled a small gourd from his robes and poured ash into the fire. The smoke turned deep blue. He chanted in the old tongue. The wind answered. The earth trembled. And then 2 frogs leaped out of the fire. The people screamed and stumbled back. But the priest smiled. The gods have spoken. He turned to the women, still human, still shaking. You have 2 choices, he said. Face the spirits of the forest and live as beasts in the land of mud and silence. Or confess and beg the mercy of the one you betrayed. Amina stood still. The entire village watched her. Kemi collapsed to her knees. Forgive me, she cried. Please. We were weak. Zula, silent at first, slowly joined her, tears flowing. We were jealous. You had everything, and we had nothing. But now I see. You are not just beautiful, Amina. You are powerful, stronger than both of us combined. The air grew quiet. Amina stepped closer. I would have shared everything I had with you. My food, my joy, my crown. But you chose to take and destroy. She closed her eyes. For the sake of the girls we once were, I forgive you. The crowd murmured in surprise. "But you must still face the spirits," she continued. "Let the forest cleanse your hearts, and if you ever return with truth." The priest raised his staff. The wind howled. The earth split. From the crack rose to shimmering lights that wrapped around Kemi and Zula. Their bodies lifted. Their forms bent, and with a final scream, they were gone. Not dead, but changed. Back in the forest, they would live, as frogs, as seekers of truth. For one full cycle of the moon, they would wander. Only if they learned humility and love would they return to human form. The fire died down, the sky cleared, and Amina turned back to Abba. He took her hand, and this time, with no curse to stop them, they were wed beneath the old baobab tree. The whole village watching, singing, crying. The drums beat into the night, and far away. In the forest, two frogs sat in silence beside the same tortoise who had once guided Amina. "Are you ready to learn?" he asked them. They croaked. And so began their own journey. But as for Amina and Oba, their love grew stronger, their union blessed. She had returned, not just as a bride, but as a woman reborn, and the story of the frog bride was told for generations. Not just as a tale of betrayal, but one of forgiveness, strength, and the power of true love. Asterisk. The wedding of Amina and Oba became the most celebrated event in the history of Nwanje village, not because of the gold or the dancers or the food, though all were abundant, but because of what it symbolized: survival, truth, and the triumph of love over betrayal. The baobab tree, under which the ceremony took place, stood older than memory itself. And now, it stood witness to something even more ancient than time, a bond unbroken by darkness. Abba placed a simple but sacred crown on Amina's head. Unlike the golden tiaras of queens past, this crown was woven from forest vines, river, pearls, and a single white feather from the egret that had once guided Amina in the forest. "I choose you," he said, his voice deep and unwavering. "Again and again, even when you were a frog, even when the world told me you were lost, I choose your soul." "And I choose you," Amina replied, placing her palm over his. "Not just for your crown or your name, but for your heart. The heart that saw me when I was invisible to the world." As they sealed their vows, a wind passed through the village, warm and fragrant, as if the ancestors themselves were smiling. Children danced. Akil shed tears. The drums echoed across hills and valleys, but not everyone celebrated with open joy. In the shadows of the forest, Kemi and Zula lived their new reality. Frogs they had become. Not from cruelty, but from necessity. They hopped by riversides and listened to whispers in the wind. Every leaf that fell reminded them of the weight of envy. Every raindrop was a lesson in humility. They argued at first, blamed each other. But in time, they grew quiet. They watched the animals care for each other. They saw how frogs shared space, food, and safety unlike them, once hoarded and plotted. One day, they found the same tortoise sitting beneath a tree. "Have you learned?" he asked, slowly chewing a leaf. Kemi nodded. "We wanted what?" She had, but we didn't see what we had ourselves. "We broke her," Zula said softly, "but she chose to heal. We are broken now, and maybe that's the only way we'll learn to mend." The tortoise blinked, satisfied. That night, beneath a full moon, the frogs glowed with soft blue light. Their forms shifted, slowly, painfully, but this time, back into humans. Naked, humbled, and weeping, they emerged from the forest, not to applause or parades, but to silence. Amina stood at the village border. She wore no crown that day, only a simple white robe, the small necklace made of pebbles from the same stream she had cried into. "You returned," she said. They fell to their knees. "We have nothing to ask but your permission." To rebuild, Amina nodded. Start with the riverbank. The village needs a new well dug. You will serve, you will sweat. And if you do it with love in your hearts, maybe the land will forgive you. So they did. They worked day and night, never asking for rest, never seeking praise. And slowly, the village began to forget the frogs and remember the girls they used to be. As for Amina and Oba, their marriage became a new chapter not just for themselves, but for the entire land. They ruled with compassion, taught their children the truth of their past, and told stories by the fire. Stories of darkness, yes, but also of light. The story of the Frog Bride became legend. Not just a tale for warnings or bedtime, but a lesson passed from tongue to ear for generations. Beware of envy. Trust carefully. But above all, love with eyes that see deeper than skin. And in that small village of Nuanje, under the wide skies of Africa, the people thrived because once, when darkness tried to bury the light, a girl turned frog, became a queen, and she chose love. Every time. Thank you for watching this epic African folktale of love, betrayal, and transformation. We hope Amina's journey touched your heart, made you think, and reminded you of the power of true love and forgiveness. Life will always test us with jealousy, pain, and even betrayal. But how we rise from those trials defines who we are. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share with someone who believes in second chances. And don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable African tales or magic meets. Emotion and tradition meets truth. Until next time, may your heart stay soft, your mind stay strong, and your spirit shine like Amina. Single quotes as top tricks. Keep listening. Tell us, what would you have done in Amina's shoes?